harmonics. These are a beautiful sound. Of course, you get harmonics on guitars or violins, for example, but a harmonic is made basically by cutting the string in half. So that instead of playing it normally, you're cutting it in half, holding it in half, and playing just half the string so that it sounds an octave higher. It's now equivalent to this octave up here. Instead of this lower G, it's up here. And the way we do that with the right hand is by using the first finger, number 2. This first knuckle gets placed on the center of the string, the midpoint of the string, and it presses it down. And then, so we're using just perhaps not right on that knuckle bend, but just a tiny bit beneath it, somewhere where it's fairly firm, and we can get a good grip on the string. Maybe I'll just try zooming this in a little bit. And then we're going to play the string with our thumb. So the trick is the timing, because if we just play it, and keep that first finger in position, that's not going to end up sounding very good. And if we let go of our first finger before we play the thumb, if we let go of 2 before we play 1, we go, it's just the normal sound. So the trick is to play and release at the same time. And that just takes a little bit of practice of practicing, zoom this back. So it's just a matter of practicing. It's something that actually is not too difficult to get. It just takes practice to be able to get it consistently. And of course, the other trick about harmonics is finding the right point, because you can do everything correctly. You can be releasing right at the right time, but if you're not in the center, you're not going to get that nice, beautiful sound. So that also just takes a little bit of experience, a little bit of practice, and especially on a pedal harp, you have to be aware of the where the string is, because there's a here we are with a G flat. If this goes to a G sharp, that same spot is not going to be where it sounds. The middle of the string is going to be lower because it's a shorter string. So there's a small but appreciable movement between the flat, the natural, and the sharp. So that's something to be aware of and pay attention to, is what key you're in, and adjust for that. So now I'm going to switch the harp around and we'll look at the left hand. So with the left hand, we use a different technique. We use some part of the palm. Now, sort of the classical, traditional thing to do is to use this outside base of the palm. So that is what holds the center of the string. And then you play again with your thumb. Now, I have a tendency to have that midpoint creep over a little bit, so that sometimes it's more just the inner side of the palm. I would say work with what works best for you. Does this feel too awkward? Or does it get you a better sound? I don't know that there's a huge difference between either two, so work with what feels best for you. And again, it's just a matter of practice, of working on that timing and finding the center of the string and getting that beautiful sound. And these fingers, they're up and a nicely rounded hand, and make sure that there's no tension creeping in there. So they're hanging out. They're not having to work or anything. So there are harmonics. Now, of course, one of the things that you can do with harmonics that you almost never see done, but that's the double harmonic, or the harmonic in a fifth or whatever. With these longer strings, you can of course cut it so that instead of playing the top half of the string, you can play the top third of the string. So that, what do we get here? So instead of an octave, we get an octave and a fifth. Or even, especially on these even longer strings, let's see. That's 2 octaves. As I say, can't bring to mind a particular piece that actually calls for that, but it's kind of fun to play around with sometimes. Now, the only other thing to mention about harmonics is something that I did mention in Ceremony of Carols when I talked about harmonics in the interlude, and that is, with the left hand, this technique, using the base of the palm, gets a better sound. It gets a beautiful sound. To my mind, much better than using this knuckle. But the problem is the right hand can't really do that, just because of how the harp is set up and the space available. So the left hand suffers a little bit from that when it comes up to some outrageously high left hand harmonic, because you start to run out of space, and it's hard to get the narrow, because here it's getting a narrow gap between where you're pressing and where you're playing. But of course, that thumb can only go, you can't compress it like this. That just doesn't work. So be aware that on high harmonics for the left hand, you of course could do this same technique using the knuckle and doing it the same as the right hand. So that's something to be aware of. And I should mention really high harmonics, that that you sometimes will see crazy high harmonics for the right hand, and they are, you can you can get them. They're certainly not as consistent as something lower, but again, you can play around with them. And if you're writing your own music, I would avoid really high harmonics, but they are possible. You do see them in some of Godefroy's music, for example, and I know there are a few other people who you look at these harmonics and you think, wow, is that really what they want? But they, well, yeah, there we go. So again, with practice, if a particular piece calls for that really high harmonic, you should be able to get it with practice somewhat consistently. And that's all I have to say on harmonics.